shock at his mother, funeral billionaire, stunned as ex-wife appears with secret twins he never knew existed. Hi, my most beautiful, most precious, most irreplaceable family. How are you today? This is your Mr. Peter, and I need you to feel these words. I love you with every breath in my body. You are not just names on a screen. You are the heartbeat of my life. My kings, my queens, my shining stars. You are my miracle, my comfort, my purpose. You are the reason I rise in love each morning and sleep in gratitude each night. You are family in every way that matters, and I carry you in my prayers, in my thoughts, and in the depths of my heart. A new prayer from my heart to yours. May God wrap you in unshakable love, the kind that holds you when the world feels cold. May joy rise in your spirit like a sunrise after the darkest night. I pray your heart knows peace that nothing can take away, and your life overflows with blessings you never saw coming. May doors open without knocking, may pain leave without warning, and may your soul bloom like a garden in spring. I speak protection over your life, healing over your wounds, laughter in your home, and endless light in your path. You are royalty, you are divinely covered, and you are loved more than you'll ever know. My beautiful family, thank you for every comment, every share, every prayer. Your love lifts me when I fall and carries me through the storms. Together, we are building something unbreakable, something eternal. Let's show the power of our love. Can we reach 1,000 likes on this video? Let the world see the strength of this beautiful family. Please like, comment, and share with all your heart, because together we are not just viewers. We are a movement of pure love. Let's begin with warmth, with grace, and with all the love in the world. My beautiful family. The Grand Metropolitan Gallery buzzed with the quiet energy of wealth and prestige, champagne flutes clinking as New York's elite moved between exhibits. Dawn Campbell stood in a simple black dress, the only one she owned suitable for such an event, watching with nervous delight as people admired her painting. At 25, with her warm brown eyes and artist's hands that never quite lost their paint stains, Dawn was distinctly out of place among the diamonds and designer labels. Your use of light is extraordinary, came a deep voice from behind. Dawn turned to find herself looking up into the piercing gray eyes of Derek Gray, billionaire tech mogul and the evening's principal patron. She recognized him instantly from magazine covers and business news segments. In person, he was taller than she expected, his custom suit accentuating broad shoulders, his dark hair precisely cut to frame features that were almost too perfect, like a sculpture rather than a man. "Thank you," she replied, trying to maintain composure, "though I'm not sure everyone shares your opinion." Derek's gaze returned to her canvas, a striking portrayal of a woman emerging from shadows into brilliant sunlight. "I don't particularly care what everyone thinks. I know value when I see it." There was something in the way he looked at the painting that caught Dawn by surprise, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even vulnerability in those otherwise calculating eyes. She'd heard the stories about Derek Gray, ruthless in business, cold in relationships, a man who collected beautiful things but never seemed to enjoy them. The contrast between darkness and light, he continued, his voice softening slightly. It's not just technique. There's truth in it. Dawn found herself unable to look away from his profile as he studied her work. The truth that we all carry, both inside us, that's what I was trying to capture. His eyes returned to hers, a hint of surprise in them. Most people just say they were inspired by a sunset or some such nonsense. "I'm not most people, Mr. Gray." A rare, genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his features. "No, you certainly aren't, Miss Campbell. Dawn Campbell." "Dawn," he repeated, as if testing the name. Like the first light breaking through darkness. Something electric passed between them in that moment, something neither fully understood, but both felt with unexpected intensity. 3 months later, Dawn sat in her modest apartment, staring at the business card Derek had given her. That night, now worn at the edges from handling. After their meeting, he had purchased her painting for triple the asking price and introduced her to several influential gallery owners. They'd had 4 dinners since then, each more intimate than the last, though always in public places with impeccable service and discreet staff. Last night, he had finally kissed her, a kiss that left her breathless and confused. Derek wasn't like the artists and dreamers she usually dated. He was controlled, precise, and impossible to read. Yet there were moments when his mask slipped, revealing something wounded beneath the power and privilege. The phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "He's using you," her mother said without preamble when Dawn answered. Eleanor Campbell had raised Dawn alone after her father abandoned them, working double shifts as a nurse to give her daughter opportunities. "Men like Derek Gray don't marry. Girls from Queens who have paint under their fingernails." "You don't know him, Mom," Dawn protested, though a small voice inside wondered if her mother was right. "I know his type. Your uncle knows people who've done business with him. They say he destroys anyone who gets in his way." What do you really know about him, Dawn? What did she know? That he called precisely when he said he would, that he remembered every detail she shared about her art, that sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression held such loneliness it made her heart ache. "I know there's more to him than what people see," she answered finally. Her mother sighed. "Just be careful. Your heart sees the best in people even when it's not there." 2 weeks later, over dinner in a private room overlooking Central Park, Derek proposed, not with flowery declarations of love, but with pragmatic statements about compatibility and mutual benefit. Dawn's uncle, Judge Martin Campbell, had recently been appointed to oversee regulatory approvals that would impact Derek's business interests. The marriage would create useful family connections. "Is this a business merger or a proposal?" Dawn asked, trying to hide her disappointment. Something flickered in Derek's eyes. Perhaps shame, perhaps uncertainty. He reached across the table, taking her hand in a rare display of spontaneous affection. "I'm not good at this," he admitted. "Relationships, emotions, but I respect you, Dawn. I admire your talent and your perspective. We make sense together." It wasn't the romantic declaration she'd dreamed of, but Dawn saw beyond his words, to the man struggling to express feelings he'd spent a lifetime suppressing. She convinced herself that love would grow in the spaces between his carefully constructed walls. "Yes," she said simply, and watched as relief washed over his face. The wedding was a spectacle befitting a man of Derek's status. 800 guests in the grand ballroom of the Grayson Hotel, owned, of course, by Derek's family. Dawn wore a custom gown that cost more than her entire college education, feeling like an actress in a play rather than a bride. Her mother sat stone-faced in the front row, having tried one final time that morning to convince Dawn to reconsider. "He'll break your heart," Eleanor had warned, straightening Dawn's veil with trembling hands. "Men who can't love themselves can't truly love others." "He just needs someone to show him how," Dawn had replied, with the optimism of youth and first love. Now, as their first dance began, Dawn searched Derek's face for any sign that this day meant to him what it meant to her. His arms held her at a perfectly appropriate distance, his steps flawlessly executing the choreography they'd practiced. "You look beautiful," he said, the words seemingly sincere but rehearsed, like a line from a script. Before she could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Without missing a step in their dance, Derek extracted it, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "I need to take this," he said. "It's the Singapore deal." And just like that, he was gone, weaving through guests, toward the terrace, phone already at his ear, leaving Dawn alone in the center of the dance floor. Her father-in-law smoothly stepped in to continue the dance, patting her shoulder with grandfatherly affection. "You'll get used to it, my dear," he said kindly. "Grey men have always put business first. It's how we're built." Hours later, Dawn sat alone in the honeymoon suite, still in her wedding dress, watching the clock tick past midnight. Derek had returned to the reception long enough to cut the cake and make appropriate appearances, but had been pulled into one business conversation after another. She'd last seen him speaking intently with her uncle, their heads bent together in what looked more like negotiation than celebration. At 3 in the morning, the door finally opened. Derek entered, loosening his tie, his expression distracted. Seeing Dawn still awake, still in her gown, he paused. "You should have gone to bed," he said, his tone suggesting this was the logical course of action rather than acknowledging the symbolism of their wedding night. "I wanted to wait for you," she replied, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Derek checked his watch, frowning. "I have an early meeting tomorrow in Boston. The jet leaves at 6. He disappeared into the bathroom, emerging minutes later in silk pajamas, already typing on his phone. Without looking up, he placed a small note on the nightstand beside Dawn. "Don't wait up tomorrow," it read in his precise handwriting. Early meeting. As Derek climbed into the far side of the bed, maintaining careful distance between them, Dawn fought back tears. In the half-light, she studied her wedding ring, a flawless diamond set in platinum, beautiful and cold. Like the man who gave it to her, like the future stretching before her, golden handcuffs, her mother had called it when she'd seen the ring. Only now did Dawn begin to understand what that meant. Chapter 2. Silent Sacrifices. 8 months into her marriage, Dawn stood in what had once been her art studio, now converted into Derek's home office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows that had once illuminated her canvases, now falling across sleek furniture and minimalist decor that bore none of her warmth or personality. The walls that had once displayed her works in progress were now adorned with corporate awards and financial charts, tracking Grey Technologies' expanding empire. "Mrs. Grey," Derek's assistant Vanessa appeared in the doorway. "The movers are asking where to put the remaining art supplies." Dawn glanced at the final boxes of her creative life, brushes, paints, and half-filled sketchbooks that represented years of passion and ambition. "The storage unit," she said quietly, the words catching in her throat. "Everything goes to storage." After their honeymoon, 3 days in Paris, where Derek spent most of his time on conference calls, Dawn had tried to maintain her art career. But Derek's social obligations and business functions demanded her presence as the perfect corporate wife. Her gallery appearances dwindled, her commissions went unfinished, and gradually her name faded from the art world she'd worked so hard to enter. When Derek announced he needed a home office, more befitting his position, Dawn had offered her. Studio without protest. It was, after all, just another room that sat mostly empty now, just another dream she was setting aside. "Are you sure about this?" Vanessa asked with unexpected gentleness. In 6 months as Derek's assistant, she'd witnessed Dawn's slow erasure. Dawn smiled thinly. "My husband needs the space." That evening, Dawn adjusted her emerald gown in the limousine as they approached the Technological Innovation Gala. Derek, immaculate in his tuxedo, reviewed notes on his tablet, barely glancing up when she spoke. "The Moore Foundation is considering featuring artists in their next funding cycle," she mentioned, trying to engage him. "I thought perhaps I could put together a proposal connecting technology and visual arts." Derek's eyes flicked briefly to her. "The Moore Foundation is exclusively focused on quantum computing advances. They're not interested in finger painting." The casual dismissal stung, but Dawn persisted. "Actually, there's a growing intersection between computational design and traditional art forms. I've been researching. We're here. Derek cut her off as the car stopped. Remember, the Nakamura Group executives are my priority tonight. Their partnership could increase our market penetration in Asia by 30%. The ballroom glittered with tech industry royalty. Dawn had learned the rhythms of these events, when to smile, when to nod, when to touch Derek's arm with just the right amount of affection to project the image of the perfect power couple. She had studied the business journals, memorized key players' backgrounds, and taught herself enough about Derek's industry to move comfortably among his peers. Near the bar, she overheard two executives discussing a design problem with a new interface their company was developing. "Users find it unintuitive," one was saying. "The engineers understand it, but regular people get lost." "I might have a solution," Dawn offered, seeing an opportunity to contribute meaningfully. Her art background had given her insights into visual communication that these technical minds often missed. The executives looked interested as she began explaining her idea, but their expressions changed as Derek approached. He slid his arm around Dawn's waist, his grip just slightly too tight. "Gentlemen, I see you've met my wife," he interrupted with a practiced smile. "I hope she's not boring you with her artistic theories." One of the men, the CEO of a major design firm, looked confused. "Actually, she had some fascinating insights about our interface challenges," Derek laughed, the sound smooth but hollow. "My wife confuses finger painting with corporate strategy." He signaled to a passing waiter. "Another champagne, darling? Perhaps you should check on the silent auction. I believe they're featuring some watercolors that might interest you." The dismissal was clear. Dawn's cheeks burned as Derek seamlessly transitioned to discussing market projections, effectively erasing her from the conversation and undermining any credibility she might have established. Later that night, as they returned home in silence, Dawn fought back tears, not of sadness but of frustration. She had spent months learning his world, only to be treated like an ornamental accessory. "Those men were actually interested in what I had to say," she finally said as they entered their penthouse. Derek loosened his tie. "Dawn, these aren't gallery openings with artsy types fawning over symbolism. These are serious business people making billion-dollar decisions. Your little suggestions, however well-intended, could undermine my authority. So I'm just supposed to stand there looking pretty? Is that all you married me for?" Something cold flickered in Derek's eyes. "I married you because you understand beauty and social graces. I need that in my position, but when it comes to business matters, leave those to me." 3 weeks later, Dawn received a call from Thomas Chen, her former classmate from art school, who had gone on to found one of the most innovative design firms in the country. "I need your help, Dawn," Thomas explained. "There's a rumor that Gray Technologies is looking for a design partner for their new consumer line, but they've rejected all the major firms. The word is that Derek Gray thinks we're all too conventional." Dawn hesitated. Derek hadn't mentioned this project to her. "Their current prototypes test poorly with focus groups," Thomas continued. "Too cold and clinical. They need something with human appeal." That night, Dawn cautiously broached the subject over dinner. "I heard your company is struggling with the design for the new consumer line." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Where did you hear that?" "It's all over the industry news." She lied smoothly, protecting her source. "I might know someone who could help. Thomas Chen. His firm specializes in humanizing technology." "Chen Design? They're too avant-garde for our corporate clients, but perfect for consumers," Dawn countered. "People want technology that feels personal, not institutional." Thomas understands that balance. For once, Derek seemed to consider her words. His current design teams were indeed failing to create the emotional connection the marketing department insisted was necessary. Reluctantly, he agreed to a meeting. Dawn spent days preparing, connecting Thomas with key people at Grey Technologies, and helping him understand exactly what Derek would respond to. She coached him on Derek's preferences, his corporate vision, even the specific phrases that would resonate with him. The partnership was announced a month later at a major press event. Dawn watched from the audience as Derek and Thomas shook, hands on stage, photographers capturing the moment. This revolutionary design approach will distinguish Grey Technologies in the consumer market, Derek announced to the assembled press. I'd like to thank my exceptional team for discovering Chen Design and recognizing their potential. Not once did he mention Dawn's role. Not once did he acknowledge that without her, this partnership would never have happened. As applause filled the room, Thomas caught her eye from the stage and gave her a small, knowing nod of gratitude and recognition, the only acknowledgement she would receive. At the reception afterward, Dawn circulated among guests, playing her part perfectly while Derek basked in praise for his visionary leadership. "How did you find Chen?" an influential tech blogger asked Derek as Dawn stood silently beside him. "Their aesthetic seems so different from your usual corporate partnerships." Derek smiled confidently. "I've always had an eye for untapped talent. My team conducted an exhaustive search for design firms thinking outside conventional parameters." Dawn felt herself becoming invisible even as she stood there. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had sacrificed her own artistic career only to use those same creative instincts to further Derek's success, all without recognition. That night, examining her reflection in their bathroom mirror, Dawn barely recognized herself. The vibrant artist with paint-stained hands and passionate eyes had been replaced by a perfectly groomed corporate wife, whose greatest achievement was advancing her husband's interests from the shadows. "What happened to you?" she whispered to her reflection. The Chen Design partnership proved wildly successful, breathing new life into Grey Technologies' consumer division. Derek's company's stock soared, his professional reputation enhanced by his apparent vision in selecting such an innovative design partner. As Dawn watched Derek give interviews taking credit for the partnership she had orchestrated, she realized she had become a ghost in her own life, present but unseen, contributing but uncredited, essential but unacknowledged. She was living in a gilded cage of her own construction, her talents channeled into making Derek shine brighter, while her own light dimmed. The realization settled into her bones with a cold, heavy certainty. That evening, when Derek returned home triumphant from another day of accolades, Dawn was sitting in the dark living room, staring out at the city. "Lights! The Chen partnership has exceeded all projections," he announced, pouring himself a scotch. "The board has approved the expansion into European markets." "Congratulations," Dawn said softly, not turning to look at him. Derek paused, perhaps sensing something different in her tone. For a brief moment, it seemed he might acknowledge her contribution, might finally see her as a partner rather than an accessory. Instead, he checked his watch. "Don't wait up. I have calls with the Tokyo office tonight." As he disappeared into his office, the room that had once held her dreams, Dawn made a silent promise to herself. She would not disappear entirely. Somehow, someday, she would find a way to reclaim the parts of herself she had surrendered in the name of love. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. Dawn first suspected she was pregnant during a charity luncheon benefiting children's art education, an irony not lost on her as she excused herself from the table for the third time, fighting waves of nausea. In the ornate bathroom of the Plaza Hotel, she gripped the marble countertop, staring at her pale reflection. "Are you all right, dear?" An older woman's voice echoed against the tile as Evelyn Gray, Derek's mother, entered with concern in her eyes. Dawn straightened immediately. "Just a touch of something, nothing serious." Evelyn studied her with the penetrating gaze that her son had inherited. I had morning sickness at all hours of the day with Derek. Couldn't keep anything down for months. The observation hung in the air between them, neither confirmation nor question. Dawn said nothing, but her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. He wasn't an easy pregnancy, Evelyn continued, her voice softening. Nor an easy child. Grey men rarely are. 3 days later, a doctor confirmed what Dawn already knew. Twins. 2 heartbeats flickering on the ultrasound screen like distant stars. She had cried then. Tears of joy, fear, and something else she couldn't name. Derek had been in Singapore for 2 weeks. She hadn't told him about the appointment. High risk, the doctor had cautioned, noting Dawn's slight build and the twins' positioning. You'll need to take exceptional care. Dawn had nodded, clutching the first sonogram images, and wondering how Derek would react to this unplanned development. They had discussed children in the abstract way. They discussed most personal matters, as future considerations to be scheduled at the optimal time for Derek's career trajectory. This was not that time. Now, standing in the corner of Derek's parents' spectacular home, watching servers prepare for their 40th anniversary celebration, Dawn felt a ripple of anxiety. She was 9 weeks along, still not showing, but increasingly exhausted by the demands of pregnancy alongside her social obligations. Tonight would be the perfect opportunity to share the news with the family, if only Derek would arrive in time. Her phone buzzed with a message from him. Landing delayed. Start without me. Typical. Dawn composed her features into the pleasant expression she had perfected and moved among the gathering guests. Tonight's event included the Grey Technologies board members and their spouses, all people whose names, interests, and children's accomplishments Dawn had meticulously memorized. The dinner was half over when Derek finally arrived, sliding into his seat beside Dawn with barely a greeting, immediately engaging the CEO of a potential acquisition target seated across from them. During a lull in conversation, Dawn leaned toward Derek. "Your parents look so happy together," she observed, watching his father tenderly adjust his mother's shawl. 40 years is remarkable. Derek responded, attention on his water glass. Mother was always pragmatic about her role. She understood what was required of a grey wife. Dawn pressed on. "Have you thought about where we might be in 40 years? Depends on market conditions. If the Asian expansion..." "I meant us," Dawn interrupted, her hand finding his under the table. "Our family." Derek finally looked at her, puzzled by her persistence. Before he could respond, his father called for everyone's attention and raised a toast to his wife. "To Evelyn," the elder Grey said with genuine warmth, "who has been not just my wife, but my partner in every sense. Her wisdom has shaped our family and our business in ways visible and invisible." The acknowledgement brought tears to Dawn's eyes. It was everything she had hoped for in her own marriage: partnership, recognition, respect. As applause faded, conversation turned to Grey Technologies' planned expansion into emerging markets. The board chairman asked Derek about regulatory challenges. "We've prepared extensively," Derek assured him. "Our legal team has identified all potential obstacles." Dawn, who had spent hours discussing these very issues with her uncle the judge, saw an opportunity to contribute meaningfully. "The regulatory landscape in Southeast Asia is especially complex," she added. "But the personal relationships we've been building with regional officials should help navigate those waters." A silence fell over the table. Derek's expression hardened as he turned to her. "My wife thinks running a multinational corporation is like managing a household budget," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Dawn, darling, perhaps you could check if the kitchen needs help with dessert preparations." Heat rushed. to Dawn's face as several board members chuckled uncomfortably. Derek had not only dismissed her contribution, but had done so in the most patronizing way possible, suggesting she belonged in the kitchen rather than the boardroom. "I was only," she began. "Just a little joke," Derek interrupted smoothly, placing his hand over hers in a gesture that appeared affectionate but felt like restraint. "Dawn has so many talents, but she'll be the first to admit that international business isn't among them." The conversation resumed, flowing around Dawn as if she had become invisible. She maintained her smile through dessert, though each bite tasted like ash. When she excused herself early, claiming a headache, not even Derek noticed her departure. 3 weeks later, Dawn accompanied Derek to a crucial dinner with potential investors from the Vanderberg Group, whose funding was essential for Gray Technology's next phase of growth. She had spent days researching the key players, learning that Marcus Vanderberg's wife was deeply involved in arts education, a potential connection Dawn hoped might indirectly help Derek's cause. The private dining room at 11 Madison Park hummed with expectation as introductions were made. Dawn moved with practiced grace, engaging Mrs. Vanderberg in conversation about her foundation's work. "Your perspective is refreshing," the older woman said warmly. "Most executives' wives I meet can only discuss real estate and vacations." Dawn smiled. "Actually, before I married Derek, I was quite involved in arts education myself. I'd love to hear more about your initiatives." As their conversation deepened, Dawn noticed Marcus Vanderberg watching them with interest. When the men's discussion hit a lull, he turned to Derek. "Your wife has been sharing some fascinating insights about integrating arts into STEM programs," he remarked. "Helen's been advocating this approach for years. Perhaps Dawn could consult with our foundation." Derek's smile remained fixed, but Dawn saw the tension in his jaw. "Dawn certainly has creative opinions," he said, reaching for his wine glass. "But I fear her talents are more decorative than functional." The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter. Dawn sat perfectly still, the words cutting deeper than any physical blow. Decorative, not functional. An ornament, not a person. Mrs. Vanderberg's sympathetic glance only intensified Dawn's humiliation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of practiced smiles and hollow conversation, while inside, something fundamental shifted in Dawn's heart. The final breaking point came a week later. Dawn had arranged to attend a board meeting with Derek, hoping to better understand the company's operations. She had been studying the financial reports, identifying patterns and potential opportunities that aligned with her knowledge of emerging cultural trends. As she approached the conference room, Dawn overheard Derek speaking to his executive team. "Before we begin, a quick note. My wife may be joining us. She's developed a sudden interest in corporate governance." His tone made it clear what he thought of this development. "Humor her if necessary, but let's keep substantive discussions. Until after she leaves, we have actual business to conduct." The casual cruelty of his words stopped Dawn cold. This wasn't just public humiliation. This was active undermining, a deliberate effort to ensure she remained powerless and uninformed. When she entered moments later, the false smiles and overly simplified explanations confirmed everything she had heard. 15 minutes into the meeting, Derek's assistant approached her with an apologetic expression. "Mrs. Gray, there seems to be some confusion. This is an executive-level meeting requiring security clearance." Dawn looked to Derek, waiting for him to intervene, to acknowledge that as his wife, she had every right to be there. Instead, he shrugged apologetically. "Security protocols, darling. Perhaps we can review the public-facing reports later." As security escorted her from the room, Dawn heard laughter behind her, not cruel but dismissive, as if her presence had been a child's amusing interruption rather than a legitimate attempt to engage with her husband's world. That night, alone in their penthouse, Dawn made a decision. She had tried for nearly a year to be the perfect wife, to support Derek's ambitions while sublimating her own, to contribute value only to be treated as valueless, all while carrying his children he didn't even know existed because he had never given her the chance to tell him. Tomorrow night, she would create one last opportunity for honesty between them, one final chance for Derek to see her, truly see her, as a partner rather than a possession. With renewed purpose, Dawn dialed her doctor, confirming that everything was proceeding normally with her pregnancy despite the stress. Then she called the florist, ordering dozens of candles and white roses. Finally, she opened the back of her closet, removing the garment bag that contained her wedding night dress. An elegant ivory silk confection she had never worn because Derek had been too busy with business calls on their wedding night. The stage would be set. Their bedroom would be transformed into a romantic sanctuary. And in this sacred space, Dawn would offer Derek her heart one final time, along with the news of their children. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach, feeling a flutter that might have been imagination, or might have been her twins making their presence known. "Your father will either love us as we deserve," she whispered to them, "or we will find a way forward without him." The decision crystallized within her, not with anger but with a calm certainty. This would be the night that determined whether her marriage would become the partnership she had dreamed of or end as the business arrangement Derek had always treated it as. Dawn Campbell Gray, who had slowly disappeared into the shadow of her husband's ambition, made a solemn vow to her unborn children. After tomorrow night, one way or another, she would begin reclaiming herself, for their sake, for her own. Chapter 4. Midnight Exile. The transformation of their bedroom took Dawn most of the day. She dismissed the housekeeper, wanting to create this sanctuary with her own hands, perhaps the last meaningful act she would perform in this apartment that had never felt like home. White rose petals formed a path from the door to the bed. Dozens of candles waited to be lit, their soft vanilla scent already perfuming the air. On the nightstand sat a small silver gift box containing the positive pregnancy test and a card with a simple message: "We are 3, actually 4 now." Her wedding night dress, ivory silk with delicate lace trim, hung on the bathroom door. Dawn ran her fingers along the material, remembering how she had imagined Derek slowly removing it that first night, how she had pictured tenderness that never materialized. Tonight would be different. Tonight would be a new beginning, or a definitive end. "Mrs. Gray," Derek's assistant's voice came through her phone. "Mr. Gray wanted me to inform you he's secured the Nakamura acquisition. He'll be celebrating with the executive team tonight." Dawn's heart sank. What time should I expect him? He didn't specify. These celebrations usually run late. Of course, they did. Dawn closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. "Please tell my husband I have important news to share. I'll be waiting for him." At 9 o'clock, Dawn lit the candles. At 10, she changed into the ivory nightgown, her hands trembling slightly, as she smoothed the silk over her still flat stomach. At 11, she refreshed her makeup and relit candles that had burned too low. By midnight, the roses had begun to wilt in the warmth of the bedroom, their sweet scent turning slightly cloying. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then building to a steady drumming against the windows. Dawn checked her phone repeatedly, but Derek sent no messages. This was his pattern. No explanations, no consideration that she might worry or wait. In his world, she simply adjusted to his schedule, existing in the spaces he permitted. It was nearly 1 in the morning when she heard the penthouse elevator open. Dawn quickly checked her reflection, heart racing with equal parts hope and trepidation. She positioned herself on the edge of the bed, the gift box in her hands. The bedroom door swung open with more force than necessary. Derek stood silhouetted in the doorway, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and the distinct smell of expensive scotch emanated from him. "What is this?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at the candles and flowers, his words slightly slurred. Dawn rose, setting aside the gift box. "I wanted to create something special, to talk to you." Derek stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over the romantic scene with an expression that shifted from confusion to something darker. His laugh, when it came, was harsh and unfamiliar. "Talk? Dressed like that?" He gestured toward her nightgown. "This looks more like desperation than conversation." The cruelty in his voice stunned Dawn. "Derek, please. There's something important. Is this because of Melissa?" he interrupted, loosening his tie completely and tossing it aside. Dawn froze. "Melissa?" "My VP of marketing." Derek watched her face with cold curiosity, his expression devoid of empathy. "You've met her several times. Blonde, Stanford MBA, actually contributes something valuable to my company." The implication hung in the air between them like poison gas. Dawn struggled to breathe, to process what he was saying. Are you having an affair?" she managed, her voice barely audible. Derek shrugged, the gesture casual, as if discussing a mundane business matter. "I wouldn't call it an affair. That implies something sordid. Melissa and I have a mutually beneficial arrangement." "How long?" Dawn whispered, feeling the room beginning to spin around her. "Does it matter?" He moved to the bar cart in the corner, pouring himself another drink. "Our marriage was never about fidelity, Dawn. It was about presentation, about creating the right image. You got the lifestyle, the status, the name. I got a presentable wife for social functions." Each word struck like a physical blow. Dawn wrapped her arms protectively around her middle, shielding her unborn children from the ugly truth filling the room. "I thought we had more than that," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I thought there was something real between us." Derek turned to her, his expression almost pitying. "That was your mistake. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am." Perhaps it was the pregnancy hormones or the accumulated weight of a year's worth of disillusionment. But something in Dawn finally broke. "You're right. You never pretended to be kind or caring or capable of love. That was the one honest thing about you. You showed me exactly how empty you are inside. I just refused to see it." His eyes narrowed, unused to such direct challenge from her. "Careful, Dawn. No." She straightened, a strange calm settling over her. "I've been careful for too long. Careful not to upset you. Careful not to expect too much. Careful to be perfect while you treat me like I'm nothing. I'm done being careful." Derek set down his glass with deliberate precision. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I deserve better than this. Better than you." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "After everything I've given you, the life you have now compared to your pathetic artist's existence before me, you should be grateful." Grateful? The word tasted bitter on her tongue. For being erased, for being humiliated, for being treated like a decorative object rather than a partner. Derek's face hardened. "I've had enough of this melodrama. I came home to celebrate the biggest acquisition of my career, not deal with your emotional breakdown." He moved toward the door. "I'll sleep in the guest room. We can discuss divorce terms in the morning." Divorce. The word echoed in the candlelit room, stark and final. Dawn reached for the silver gift box, her last hope, for salvaging something from the wreckage of their marriage. "Derek, wait. There's something you need to know." He turned back, his expression cold. "There's nothing you have to say that I need to hear. This marriage was always a business arrangement with an expiration date. That date has arrived. But the babies, Don't, he cut her off sharply, misunderstanding her words. Don't try to manipulate me with some fictional future or emotional appeal. It won't work. Dawn stared at him, realizing he had misunderstood her words, thinking she was speaking hypothetically rather than literally. Before she could clarify, Derek's gaze fell on her grandmother's crystal vase on the nightstand. A wedding gift containing a single white rose. "This farce of a marriage is over," he said with cold finality, then, in a sudden burst of anger, swept the vase from the nightstand. It shattered against the wall, water and crystal fragments spraying across the room. Dawn gasped, instinctively stepping back as tiny shards embedded themselves in the carpet, a perfect metaphor for the irreparable damage to their relationship. "Get out," Derek said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "Pack whatever you need and get out tonight." Dawn stood perfectly still, unable to process the rapid unraveling of everything around her. "It's after 1 in the morning. It's raining. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my concern anymore." His gaze was utterly devoid of empathy. "I want you gone before I wake up tomorrow. My lawyers will contact you about settlement terms." "Derek, please listen. Get out." Each word was enunciated with lethal precision. "And take your emotional manipulation with you." With that, he turned and left the room, closing the door with controlled force that somehow felt more violent than if he had slammed it. Dawn stood motionless among the flickering candles and scattered rose petals, the silver gift box still clutched in her hand. Outside, the rain intensified, lashing against the windows like nature itself was raging against what had just transpired. With mechanical movements, she changed into simple clothes and packed a small overnight bag with essentials. The gift box, with the pregnancy test she left on the bed, a truth he hadn't allowed her to share, evidence of what he was throwing away without even knowing. As she moved through the darkened penthouse toward the elevator, Dawn caught a glimpse of herself in the entryway mirror. The woman who stared back was pale but composed, her eyes holding a clarity that had been absent for too long. The reflection reminded her of her own painting that had first caught Derek's attention, a woman emerging from shadows into light. In the elevator descending from the penthouse that had never been a home, Dawn placed a protective hand over her stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered to her unborn twins, "but we're going to be okay." The lobby was deserted at this hour. Outside, rain poured in sheets, the city lights blurred and distorted through the deluge. Dawn opened her umbrella, a futile shield against the storm, and stepped out into the dark, wet night. Exile made manifest in each step that took her away from the man who had never truly seen her. She had arrived at this marriage full of hope and left it stripped of everything but the most essential truth, her own worth, which Derek Gray had never recognized, but which she would never again allow anyone to diminish. Chapter 5. Rebirth through fire. The taxi dropped Dawn at the only place she could think to go at such an hour, the Wellington Hotel, where she and Derek had stayed briefly after their wedding while their penthouse was being renovated. The night clerk recognized her from those happier days, discreetly processing her credit card without comment on her disheveled appearance or the late hour. The taxi dropped Dawn at the only place she could think to go at such an hour, the Wellington Hotel, where she and Derek had stayed briefly after their wedding while their penthouse was being renovated. The night clerk recognized her from those happier days, discreetly processing her credit card without comment on her disheveled appearance or the late hour. In the anonymous safety of room 718, Dawn finally allowed herself to break. She sank to the floor, still in her rain-soaked clothes, and wept, not delicate tears but raw, primal sobs that tore from somewhere deep inside her. She cried for the dreams she'd surrendered, for the love she'd poured into an empty vessel, for the humiliations she'd endured thinking they were temporary stepping stones to happiness. Most of all, she cried for her unborn children, who would enter the world without a father who wanted them. Dawn didn't know how long she sat there, but eventually the tears subsided, leaving behind a strange, hollow clarity. She showered, wrapped herself in the hotel bathrobe, and sat by the window watching dawn break over the city. A cruel joke of the universe that her name should herald the beginning of this particular day. Her phone remained silent. No calls or messages from Derek, not even to check if she had arrived somewhere safely. The final confirmation, if she needed it, that she had meant nothing to him beyond her utility. Morning brought a wave of nausea so violent that Dawn barely made it to the bathroom. As she knelt on the cold tile, retching, a sharp pain knifed through her abdomen. Then another, something warm trickled down her thigh. Blood. The hotel staff reacted quickly to her panicked call, summoning an ambulance that wailed through morning traffic to Mount Sinai Hospital. In the emergency department, Dawn heard phrases that floated around her like debris in a flood. Threatened miscarriage, 12 weeks, twins, stress-induced. "Is there someone we can call for you, Mrs. Gray?" a nurse asked gently, placing a hand on Dawn's shoulder. Dawn opened her mouth to say her husband's name, then closed it again. Derek had made his position clear. "No," she whispered, "there's no one." Dr. Elena Rossi was petite, with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering to be easily shocked. "The good news," she told Dawn after the ultrasound, "is that both heartbeats are still strong, but your body is under extreme stress, and that's creating a hostile environment for the pregnancy." "What can I do?" Dawn asked, her hands protectively cradling her stomach. "Complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks. Minimal movement. No stress." Dr. Rossi's expression was serious. "Do you have someone who can care for you? This isn't something you should handle alone." Dawn stared at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into her hair. "I'll figure something out." Later that day, as Dawn was being prepared for discharge, a hospital social worker named Mira Santos appeared at her bedside. "Dr. Rossi asked me to speak with you," she said, pulling up a chair. "She's concerned about your support system." Dawn's laugh held no humor. "That makes 2 of us." Mira wasn't easily deterred. "You mentioned you were previously an artist. Do you have connections in that community? Former colleagues, friends, mentors?" Dawn considered the question. Since marrying Derek, she had allowed most of her art world relationships to wither, focusing instead on his social circles. But there was one person, Catherine Miller, Dawn said softly. "My professor from art school. We've stayed in loose touch, but it's been a while." Mira nodded encouragingly. "Would you like to try calling her?" Catherine's voice, when she answered, brought a flood of memories from a time when Dawn had believed in herself and her talent. "Dawn Campbell, it's been ages. How are you, dear?" The simple kindness in her former mentor's voice broke something in Dawn, and the whole story came pouring out. Her disastrous marriage, the pregnancy, being thrown out, the hospital. "Where are you now?" Catherine demanded when Dawn finally ran out of words. "Still at Mount Sinai. They're discharging me, but I have nowhere—" "Nonsense!" Catherine interrupted firmly. "You're coming to Harbor Point. I have plenty of room, and the sea air will do you good." Harbor Point was a small coastal town 3 hours north of the city, where Catherine had retired to open a modest art gallery. Dawn had visited once, years ago, charmed by its picturesque streets and the rhythm of tide-driven life so different from Manhattan's frenetic pace. "I couldn't impose," Dawn began. "It's not an imposition, it's a rescue mission," Catherine said, with the authority that had once terrified first-year art students. "I'll drive down to get you myself." 2 days later, Dawn was installed in Catherine's guest room overlooking the harbor. The doctor's orders for bed rest meant Dawn spent long hours watching boats drift in and out of the marina. the steady, predictable movement of the tides becoming a comfort in a life that had lost all certainty. Catherine was a perfect caretaker, attentive without hovering, compassionate without pity. She brought Dawn meals on a tray, supplied her with books and art supplies, and most importantly, asked no questions about what Dawn planned to do next. "Healing happens in its own time," she said simply when Dawn tried to apologize for her extended stay. "The babies are the priority now." On her third day in Harbor Point, Dawn's phone lit up with a text from Derek. "My lawyer will contact you regarding divorce terms. The prenup is clear about infidelity, but I'm prepared to be generous if this is handled discreetly." Infidelity. Of course he would twist the narrative, painting her as the unfaithful one despite his own admitted affair. It was so perfectly, predictably, Derek, rewriting reality to maintain his spotless public image while smearing hers. Dawn turned off the phone without responding and slid it into a drawer. Let his lawyers search for her. She had more important concerns now than Derek Gray's attempts to control the story of their failed marriage. As the days of enforced rest stretched into weeks, Dawn found her artist's eye awakening. She began sketching the view from her window. Not just the picturesque harbor scene that any tourist might appreciate, but the details: a weathered fisherman mending nets with gnarled hands, children constructing elaborate sandcastles with fierce concentration, an elderly couple walking the shore each evening, their synchronized steps evidence of decades moving in harmony. Catherine observed these drawings with quiet approval. "You're seeing again," she noted, "really seeing." One morning, Dawn's roommate from the hospital, Lucia Vega, called with unexpected news. "My mother wants to meet you," she announced without preamble. "Your mother? Why?" "She saw your sketches when she visited me, the ones you did while we were waiting for test results. She has some crazy idea she wants to discuss with you." Lucia's mother, Maria Vega, arrived at Catherine's house the following day. A formidable woman in her 60s, with shrewd eyes and the self-assured manner of someone accustomed to being heard. She had built a successful technology company in the 1990s before selling it for a fortune, and now devoted herself to various philanthropic ventures. "These children's drawings," Maria said, spreading Dawn's hospital sketches on the kitchen table. "They're extraordinary." Dawn flushed. "They were just to distract Lucia's son during a scary time." "Exactly," Maria said, tapping one image that showed a boy transforming into a superhero with each sequential frame. "You distilled complex emotions into visual storytelling that a 5-year-old could understand. Do you know how rare that talent is?" Dawn shook her head, uncertain where this was leading. "I've been funding educational initiatives for years," Maria continued. "One persistent problem is engaging children from disadvantaged backgrounds in learning. Traditional methods often fail them." She fixed Dawn with an intense gaze. "I believe art is an untapped educational tool, but most art education programs are either too technical or too abstract." "What are you suggesting?" Catherine asked, clearly intrigued. "A new approach to children's art education, one that uses visual storytelling to teach everything from mathematics to emotional intelligence." Maria turned to Dawn. "I want to fund a pilot program, and I want you to design it." Dawn stared at her in disbelief. "Miss Vega, I'm hardly in a position to—" "Call me Maria," she interrupted, "and you're in exactly the right position. You have talent, you clearly understand children, and frankly, my dear, you need a purpose beyond your current circumstances." Dawn glanced down at her rounded stomach, now visibly housing twins at 18 weeks. "I'm about to have 2 very demanding purposes." Maria waved this away. "All the more reason to build something meaningful, something that's yours." That night, unable to sleep, Dawn found herself doing something she hadn't done in months, creating with purpose. She sketched concept after concept for an art-based educational program, drawing from her own childhood experiences and the techniques that had helped her express complex emotions through art. By morning, her bed was covered with drawings, and her mind was clearer than it had been since that rainy night in Manhattan. Maria was right. She needed this, needed to create something that was hers alone, independent of Derek or his world. When Catherine brought breakfast, she found Dawn surrounded by sketches, her face animated with an excitement that had been absent since her arrival. "I think I have a concept," Dawn said, holding up a drawing of a classroom, unlike any traditional learning space. An immersive, art-based educational environment where children learn through creating rather than consuming. Catherine studied the design, then looked at Dawn with pride shining in her eyes. "You're not just having babies," she said softly. "You're being reborn yourself." Over the following months, as Dawn's body expanded with her growing sons, so too did her vision for what would eventually be named chromatic learning. Maria provided initial funding, business guidance, and introductions to educators eager to try new approaches with struggling students. Working from Catherine's sunroom, now converted to a home office under doctor's orders that Dawn still limit physical activity, she developed curriculum, design concepts, and teaching methodologies that integrated art with traditional subjects. The program began to take shape just as Dawn's due date approached. A small storefront in Harbor Point was secured for the first chromatic learning center, set to open 6 months after the twins' birth. Local teachers expressed interest in training, and a waiting list formed of parents intrigued by this innovative approach. On a bright September morning, Dawn's water broke as she was reviewing color schemes for the center's interior. The twins, Alexander and James Campbell, arrived after 14 hours of labor, healthy despite their slightly early arrival at 37 weeks. As Dawn held her sons for the first time, their tiny, perfect faces studying her with solemn curiosity, she felt a completion that had nothing to do with the man whose features they carried. These boys were hers, created from love, even if that love had been one-sided. When the birth certificate forms arrived, the nurse asked for the father's name. Dawn didn't hesitate. "Unknown," she said clearly, her gaze never leaving her sons' faces. The nurse's expression remained professionally neutral. "Are you sure, Mrs. Gray? Once filed this way, it's difficult to amend." "I'm sure," Dawn replied. "And it's Ms. Campbell now. Dawn Campbell." Later, as twilight painted Harbor Point in shades of lavender and gold, Dawn stood at the nursery window watching her sleeping sons. Catherine joined her, wrapping an arm around Dawn's shoulders. "They're beautiful," the older woman said softly. "Perfect." Dawn nodded, tears of exhaustion and joy mingling. "I used to think perfect meant flawless," she whispered. "Now I know it just means complete." In that moment, watching her sons breathe in perfect synchrony, Dawn felt the final pieces of her old self fall away. The woman who had disappeared into Derek Gray's shadow was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but illuminated from within. A rebirth as profound as the one she had just guided her sons through. "We're going to be okay," she told her sleeping. Her babies, a promise and a declaration of independence in 5 simple words. Chapter 6, Parallel Kingdoms. 8 years passed, like the turning pages of 2 very different stories, running parallel but never intersecting. Dawn Campbell's modest educational experiment, chromatic learning, had expanded from a single storefront in Harbor Point to 17 locations across the East Coast. What began as an alternative approach for struggling students had evolved into a sought-after program that attracted children from all backgrounds. Parents marveled at how Dawn's innovative methods unlocked creativity while strengthening traditional academic skills. Educators wrote case studies, Universities sent teaching candidates to observe. The twins, Alexander and James, thrived in the warm community that had embraced their mother. At 8, they were already showing distinct personalities. Alexander possessed his father's commanding presence and strategic mind, while James had Derek's analytical precision coupled with Dawn's artistic sensitivity. They had their father's dark hair and striking grey eyes, but their expressions held Dawn's warmth and compassion. The small cottage Dawn had purchased 3 years earlier rang with their laughter and occasional arguments. It wasn't a mansion on Fifth Avenue, but it was light-filled and happy, walls covered with the boys' artwork and bookshelves overflowing with both classic children's literature and business journals. Their life wasn't luxurious, but it was rich in ways that mattered. Meanwhile, Derek Gray's trajectory had been equally dramatic, though in opposite directions. Gray Technologies had expanded globally, absorbing competitors and diversifying into emerging markets with ruthless efficiency. His wealth had multiplied exponentially, landing him on magazine covers as one of the world's 50 richest individuals. Yet, as his empire grew, his personal reputation deteriorated. 2 brief, high-profile relationships had ended messily, with gossip columns hinting at emotional unavailability and controlling behavior. Business rivals whispered about questionable tactics. Former executives described a corporate culture of fear. The brilliant but cold businessman Dawn had married had become even more isolated, living in a kingdom of wealth that felt increasingly hollow. Derek never searched for Dawn. In his mind, that chapter had closed the night she left. The divorce had proceeded without her presence, her silence interpreted as acceptance of his generous but condition-laden settlement, which she never claimed. Occasionally, seeing a woman with similar dark hair across a restaurant or gallery opening would cause an unexpected tightness in his chest. But he dismissed these moments as meaningless physiological responses to unwanted memories. They're separate. Worlds might have continued in parallel, indefinitely if not for a chance encounter at the Metropolitan Museum Spring Gala. Catherine Miller, now in her 70s but still elegant in her artist's eccentricity, attended to receive recognition for her donation of several valuable pieces to the museum's permanent collection. Evelyn Gray, Derek's mother, was a longtime museum patron seated at the same table. "Your gallery in Harbour Point has quite a reputation," Evelyn remarked during dinner. "My summer home isn't far from there. I must visit next season." "You absolutely should," Catherine agreed. "My former student runs our children's program there. Quite revolutionary what she's doing with arts education." "Oh? I'm always interested in innovative education. My foundation funds several initiatives." Catherine beamed with mentor's pride. "Dawn Campbell. She's built something remarkable with chromatic learning. Started from nothing after a difficult time and now runs centers all over the East Coast." Evelyn's hand froze midway to her water glass. "Campbell, you said?" "Yes, though for a brief time she was Dawn Gray, married some heartless corporate type who treated her abominably, left her when she was pregnant with twins, if you can imagine such cruelty. But she's flourished without him. Those boys of hers are absolutely wonderful, brilliant and kind, despite never knowing their father." The color drained from Evelyn's face. "These twins, how old are they?" "Let's see. Alexander and James just turned 8 last month. We had quite the celebration." Evelyn excused herself shortly after, retiring to the ladies' room where she spent long minutes staring at her reflection, connecting impossible dots. The timing aligned perfectly with her son's brief, never-discussed marriage. The bitter divorce had completed before she ever heard mention of a pregnancy. Grandchildren. She had grandchildren she had never met. 2 weeks later, Evelyn Gray appeared unannounced at the Harbour Point Chromatic Learning Center, introducing herself simply as Eve to the receptionist. She requested a tour, explaining her interest in educational philanthropy. When Dawn emerged from a classroom to greet the potential donor, the recognition was instantaneous and mutual. For a tense moment, neither spoke. "You should leave," Dawn finally said quietly. "Please," Evelyn replied, her usual imperious manner replaced with something almost like humility. "5 minutes, that's all I ask." In Dawn's small office, surrounded by children's artwork and educational research papers, Evelyn Gray looked completely out of place in her designer suit and perfect coiffure. "He doesn't know, does he?" she asked without preamble. Dawn's expression remained carefully neutral. Would it have mattered if he did? "I'd like to think so." But Evelyn's tone lacked conviction. She understood her son too well to believe he would have risen to the responsibility. "The boys have had a complete life. Without the Gray name or fortune," Dawn said firmly, "they'll continue to do so. They're my grandsons." The simple statement contained unexpected emotion. "I've missed 8 years already." Their conversation was interrupted by the afternoon arrival of the twins from school. The boys bounded into the office with matching backpacks and boundless energy, skidding to a halt at the sight of the elegant stranger. "Alex, James, this is Mrs." Dawn hesitated. "Eve," Evelyn supplied smoothly. "An old friend of your mother's." The boys greeted her politely, but with the natural curiosity of children. "Do you like art?" James asked. "Mom says you can tell everything important about a person by what kind of art they like." Evelyn smiled, her eyes drinking in every detail of these children who carried her family's features. "I've always been partial to the Impressionists. Monet, in particular." "Mom loves Monet too," Alex exclaimed. "She has a print of water lilies above her bed." Something in Evelyn's composed facade cracked at this casual revelation, this tiny, precious detail about the daughter-in-law she had barely known and the life she had built without them. That first meeting led to others. Cautiously at first, then with increasing warmth, Evelyn became a presence in the twins' lives. She visited Harbor Point regularly, careful never to mention her connection to Derek or even her real surname. To Alexander and James, she was simply Grandma Eve, a kind woman who brought them books, took them sailing, and listened to their stories with undivided attention. For 3 years, this delicate arrangement continued, Dawn gradually allowing Evelyn more access to her grandsons, while Evelyn respected the boundaries Dawn established. Neither woman spoke of Derek, though his shadow lingered in every shared glance, every unasked question. Then Evelyn was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim. Months, not years. In her final weeks, as autumn painted, Harbor Point in crimson and gold, Evelyn made her peace with what remained of her life. She spent precious days with the grandsons who had brought unexpected joy to her final years. She wrote letters to Dawn, to the twins to be given when they were older, and finally to her son. On her deathbed, with her lawyer present, she made one last amendment to her will. "It's time for paths to cross," she whispered to Dawn during their final goodbye. "They deserve to know their father, and he deserves a chance to be better than he's been." 3 days later, Evelyn Gray passed away peacefully in her sleep, setting in motion the collision of worlds she had carefully orchestrated from beyond the grave. Chapter 7. The Funeral Revelation. The Manhattan Cathedral stood solemn and imposing, against a steel-gray October sky, its Gothic architecture a fitting backdrop for the farewell to a grande dame of New York society. Inside, the city's elite gathered to pay respects to Evelyn Gray, philanthropist, arts patron, and mother to one of the most powerful men in the business world. Floral arrangements worth small fortunes adorned the altar, their perfume hanging heavily in the air. Politicians mingled with celebrities in pews of polished mahogany, most there more for appearances than genuine grief. Derek Gray adjusted his immaculate black tie in a private anteroom, his reflection revealing a man hardened by 10 years of relentless ambition and emotional isolation. At 42, his features had sharpened into something almost predatory, a permanent furrow etched between his brows from countless boardroom confrontations. Success had aged him prematurely, silver threading through his dark hair, lines marking territory around eyes that rarely softened with genuine emotion. The power he had accumulated seemed etched into every plane of his face. "We're ready when you are, Mr. Gray," his assistant murmured from the doorway. Derek nodded once, tucking the eulogy cards into his pocket. He had prepared meticulous remarks about his mother's charitable endeavors and social contributions. What remained unwritten were the complications of their relationship, her gentle but persistent disappointment in the man he had become, her increasing distance in recent years, her inexplicable attachment to the summer home in Harbor Point when she had properties in far more prestigious locations. The cathedral hushed as Derek took his position at the pulpit. His voice, practiced and controlled, filled the vast space with carefully chosen anecdotes and appropriate sentiments. "My mother believed in beauty," he was saying, halfway through his remarks. "In art, in nature, but most importantly, in human potential. She saw possibilities where others saw limitations. It was her greatest gift." A movement at the back of the cathedral caught his eye, late arriving mourners slipping quietly into the last row. A woman in a simple black dress, her dark hair now streaked with the faintest traces of silver. Beside, her two young boys, perhaps 10 years old, with serious expressions and matching navy blazers. Derek faltered mid-sentence, a wave of unexpected recognition washing over him. The woman was Dawn, older, more confident in her bearing, but unmistakably the wife he had discarded a decade ago. But it was the boys who caused his breath to catch, his prepared words evaporating from memory. They had his eyes, his exact eyes, the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. Impossible thoughts collided in Derek's mind as he stared, the cathedral completely silent, hundreds of gazes fixed on him as he struggled to process what he was seeing. "Mr. Gray," the minister prompted gently from nearby. Derek cleared his throat, forcing himself back to the present moment with sheer willpower. "My mother's legacy," he continued, his voice slightly hoarse, "will live on through her foundations and the lives she touched." He completed the eulogy on autopilot, his gaze repeatedly drawn to the back row, where Dawn sat between the boys. His boys, he was increasingly certain, her hand occasionally squeezing theirs in gentle reassurance. Remainder of the service passed in a blur. During the final hymn, Derek noticed Dawn leading the boys toward a side exit. Abandoning protocol, he slipped from the front pew and worked his way around the perimeter of the cathedral, intercepting them in the small garden courtyard. Dawn. She turned, her expression carefully composed, hands protectively on the boys' shoulders. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. These children carried his blood, his features, unmistakably his son's, Derek. Her voice was steady, neither warm nor cold. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Derek Gray found himself completely lost for words. His gaze moved from Dawn to the boys and back again, a storm of questions and accusations building inside him. "These are," he finally managed. "Alexander and James," Dawn supplied, her tone remaining neutral. "My sons." "Your sons." The emphasis contained volumes of disbelief and dawning anger. The boys shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing the tension between the adults. "Mom?" Alexander questioned, standing slightly taller than his brother. "Is this him? Is this our father?" Derek's breath caught. They knew of him at least. Dawn knelt to the boy's level. "Alexander, James, would you please wait for me by the fountain? Just for a few minutes." The boys reluctantly moved away, glancing back with obvious curiosity. "How dare you?" Derek hissed once they were out of earshot. How dare you keep my sons from me for... How old are they? 10 years? 10 years and 2 months, Dawn confirmed. And I didn't keep them from you, Derek. You threw us away. I never knew you were pregnant, because you didn't let me tell you. Something flashed in Dawn's eyes, the first crack in her composed facade. You were too busy accusing me of manipulation and throwing me out into the rain at 1 a.m. You should have told me afterward. These are my sons. No, Dawn interrupted, her voice still low but intense. Biologically, yes, but in every way that matters, these are my sons. I raised them. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every triumph and disappointment. Where were you? Derek ran a hand through his hair, disoriented by the sudden reshaping of his past and future. This is unbelievable. I had a right to know. Did you? Dawn reached into her handbag, removing a small silver box that Derek vaguely recognized. I left this on our bed that night. Your mother found it when she was helping you pack up my remaining things. She kept it all these years. Derek took the box, opening it to find a positive pregnancy test and a small card with faded handwriting. We are 3, actually 4 now. I tried to tell you, Dawn said softly. You didn't want to hear it. Memory returned in fragments. Dawn, in that silk nightgown, trying to speak while he raged about divorce. The box he had assumed contained some sentimental trinket meant to manipulate him into staying. My mother knew? The betrayal in this was almost as shocking as the existence of the boys. For how long? She found out when the twins were 8. She's been part of their lives for the past 3 years. 3 years! Derek's voice rose despite himself. She's known my sons for 3 years and never said a word to me? It was her choice, Dawn said. As it was mine to give them my surname and raise them away from your world. Derek's jaw clenched. Campbell, you denied them their rightful name. I gave them a good name, one untainted by the cruelty I experienced as a Grey. The air between them crackled with a decade of unspoken words and divergent lives. Derek opened his mouth to respond when a discreet cough interrupted them. Excuse me. An older gentleman in a conservative suit approached. Mrs. Campbell, Mr. Grey, I'm Howard Winters, Evelyn Grey's attorney. I'm afraid I must speak with you both immediately following the service. Mrs. Grey left specific instructions. Before either could respond, the boys returned, their patience apparently exhausted. Mum, the one Dawn had called James, said, people are starting to leave. Both boys studied Derek with undisguised curiosity. Derek found himself staring back, cataloguing features, his mother's chin on the shorter one, his own hands on the taller, expressions that reminded him of childhood photographs. Are you really our father? Alexander asked directly, his gaze unflinching in a way that was painfully familiar to Derek. Derek began, then stopped, truthfulness taking precedence over diplomacy for once. Yes I am, though I didn't know about you until today. Grandma Eve said you would be surprised, James remarked with the brutal honesty of childhood. She said you weren't ready to be a father before, but maybe you are now. Grandma Eve, Derek repeated, the nickname for his formidable mother, so unexpected it momentarily derailed his anger. Mr. Winters, Dawn interjected, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we could meet at your office later this afternoon. I'm afraid not, Mrs. Campbell. Mrs. Grey's instructions were explicit. The 3 of you, he nodded to include the twins, and Mr. Grey are to convene in the cathedral's meeting room immediately following the service for the reading of specific provisions in her will that concern you all. Derek watched Dawn's face pale slightly. The boys don't need to be part of legal discussions, she protested. On the contrary, Winters replied gently. Mrs. Grey specifically included them. She left letters for each of you that she wanted delivered in each other's presence. An hour later, seated around a polished conference table in the cathedral's private meeting room, the strange assembly gathered. Derek rigid with tension, Dawn outwardly calm, but with betraying tension in her shoulders. The twins, subdued by the formality of the occasion, and Winters methodically arranging documents before him. Mrs. Gray amended her will 3 weeks before her passing, the attorney explained. She established substantial trust funds for Alexander and James Campbell, to be administered by Mrs. Campbell until they reach 25, with the provision that they have access to educational components at 18. Derek said nothing, watching Dawn's surprised expression. She clearly hadn't expected this. Additionally, Winters continued, she left personal letters for each of you. She asked that they be read privately, but in each other's presence. He distributed 4 sealed envelopes. I'll step outside to give you privacy. When the door closed, awkward silence descended. Dawn hesitated, then nodded to the boys, who tentatively opened their letters. James read his silently, tears welling in his eyes. Alexander, his voice slightly unsteady, read portions of his aloud. Your father never knew about you, but that doesn't lessen his responsibility to you now. Give him a chance to know you, even if it's difficult at first. There's more to him than he shows the world. Derek's hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal on his own letter. His mother's elegant script filled the page. Derek, by now you've met your sons. Yes, they are yours, though you never gave Dawn the chance to tell you about them. I've known them for 3 years, the greatest gift of my final chapter. They have your mind and, thankfully, Dawn's heart. I kept their existence from you because you weren't ready. The man you've become would have seen them as possessions to control, rather than young lives to nurture. Perhaps even now your first instinct will be anger, followed by the urge to assert your legal rights. If you pursue that path, you will lose them forever, regardless of what any court might decree. This is your chance, Derek. Your chance to be better than the man who discarded their mother and the life growing inside her. Your chance to know 2 extraordinary boys who share your blood but have been spared your hardness. They deserve a father, but only if that father can see them as they are, not as extensions of his pride or ambition. The choice, as always, is yours. With hope and love. Mother. Derek looked up to find Dawn watching him, her own letter clutched tightly in her hand. Their eyes met across the table, a decade of separate lives suspended between them. They have your eyes, he said quietly, the simplest truth, the only one he could articulate in that moment. And your stubborn determination, she replied, the ghost of a smile briefly touching her lips. Outside the cathedral, rain began to fall, pattering against stained glass windows, nature's counterpoint to the storm already brewing between the parents of 2 boys caught in a revelation neither had fully prepared for. Chapter 8. War of Roses and Thorns. 3 days after the funeral, Dawn received the first legal notice. Derek's attorneys, a prestigious firm whose letterhead alone suggested astronomical hourly rates, demanded immediate paternity testing and commencement of custody proceedings. The clinical language masked what Dawn recognized instantly as Derek's opening move in a war she had long feared. The document was 47 pages of legal jargon, all conveying a simple message. Derek Gray wanted his sons, and he intended to use every resource at his disposal to get them. He's requested emergency temporary visitation while the case proceeds, Dawn's hastily retained lawyer explained over the phone. He's claiming parental alienation and irreparable harm to his relationship with the children. Relationship. Dawn's laugh held no humor. He met them 3 days ago. Unfortunately, the fact that they're biologically his gives him standing. His legal team is formidable. Dawn knew what that meant. Derek would spare no expense, deploy every resource, and leverage every connection to get what he wanted. It was how he had built his empire. It was how he approached everything. The twins, perceptive as always, sensed the sudden tension, despite Dawn's efforts to shield them. "Is he trying to take us away?" Alexander asked directly one evening, finding Dawn at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents. Dawn set down her papers, momentarily at a loss. She had never lied to her sons, but the truth seemed suddenly too heavy for their young shoulders. "He wants to be part of your lives," she finally said. "We're trying to figure out how that might work." Alexander's expression grew serious beyond his years. "But we don't even know him." "He's still your father, Alexander. That's just biology," he countered, echoing phrases he must have overheard. "You always say family is about who loves you, not just DNA." Dawn pulled him into a hug, hiding her own fears in the embrace. "That's true. But sometimes people deserve chances to show they can change." The paternity test, performed at an upscale medical office with Derek's attorneys present, confirmed what was already visually evident. The DNA match was irrefutable. Derek Gray was the biological father of Alexander and James Campbell. Armed with scientific confirmation, Derek escalated his offensive. His legal team filed for joint physical custody, demanding the boys spend alternating weeks in his Manhattan penthouse. When Dawn's attorneys argued that such a dramatic change would be destabilizing, Derek proposed purchasing a home in Harbor Point, effectively invading the sanctuary Dawn had built. The financial attacks came next. Dawn discovered Derek systematically approaching the building owners who leased space to chromatic learning centers, offering to buy the properties at inflated prices. "He's trying to become my landlord," Dawn explained to Maria Vega, her mentor and primary investor. "If he controls the buildings, he controls my business." Maria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Not if I get there first." With Maria's financial backing, Dawn countered by securing long-term leases and, where possible, purchasing her most critical locations outright. When Derek attempted to pressure Dawn's business partners, they rallied around her instead. Many had children in chromatic learning programs and had witnessed firsthand her dedication to education. The legal battle grew increasingly public. A tabloid headline, "Tech billionaire discovers secret heirs at mother's funeral," was just the beginning. Soon, variations of the story appeared everywhere, from business journals analyzing potential succession implications to morning talk shows, debating the ethics of hiding children from their father. Each day brought new speculations and invasive reporting. Their private pain transformed into public entertainment. Paparazzi began appearing outside the twins' school, forcing Dawn to arrange private security. Derek hired a crisis management team that carefully crafted his public image as the wronged father fighting to know his children. Dawn, refusing to engage in media manipulation, maintained dignified silence, which some outlets interpreted as tacit admission of wrongdoing. Behind closed doors, the court-mandated preliminary visitations were tense affairs. Derek, accustomed to commanding rooms full of executives, found himself awkwardly attempting to connect with boys who regarded him with cautious curiosity at best and open suspicion at worst. "Do you play chess?" he asked James during their second supervised visit. The boy nodded. "Mom taught me when I was 5. Something flashed in Derek's eyes, surprise perhaps that Dawn played chess, or that she had taught their son so young. "I could teach you some advanced strategies," he offered. James studied him with unsettling directness. "I placed 3rd in the regional junior tournament last year." Each interaction followed similar patterns, Derek discovering that the boys were already accomplished in areas he might have introduced, their lives full and well-rounded without his influence. It simultaneously impressed and irritated him that Dawn had raised such exceptional children alone. As the legal proceedings intensified, the effects on the twins became increasingly apparent. James grew quieter, withdrawing into books and solitary activities. Alexander's grades began to slip, his normally confident demeanor replaced with uncharacteristic anxiety. Dawn received a call from their school counselor. "The boys are under significant stress," the woman explained gently. "They feel caught in an adult conflict they don't understand and can't control." "I'm trying to protect them," Dawn insisted, fighting back tears. "I know, but children absorb more than we realize. Alexander in particular seems to feel responsible for your happiness. That's a heavy burden for a 10-year-old. That night, reviewing her legal strategy with her attorney, Dawn questioned everything. "Maybe we should consider some form of compromise," she suggested reluctantly. Her lawyer leaned forward. "Dawn, listen to me. Derek Gray doesn't compromise. Ever. Give him an inch, and he'll take everything." 2 days later, during a particularly contentious court hearing where Derek's attorneys suggested Dawn's unstable artist background made her less fit as a primary parent, Alexander collapsed in the school cafeteria. By the time Dawn reached the hospital, her son was hooked to monitors, his small face pale against the white pillow. "Stress-induced panic attack," the pediatrician explained. "Not uncommon in children experiencing family trauma, but concerning given his age." Dawn sat beside Alexander's bed, holding his hand while he slept, sedated by medication. She didn't hear the door open, only becoming aware of another presence when Derek appeared at the foot of the bed. He stared at their son, shock evident in his expression. For the first time since their reunion, Derek's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing genuine distress. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "This is what happened," Dawn answered, gesturing to their son's monitored form. "Your lawyers, your threats, your need to win at all costs. This is the price of your war, Derek. Except you're not paying it. They are." Derek stood motionless, his gaze fixed on Alexander. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, of consequences beyond balance sheets and legal victories. "He looks like you did," he said unexpectedly, "that night in the hotel when you were sick and I wouldn't listen." The reference to their past, the first acknowledgement that he remembered any of it, caught Dawn off guard. Before she could respond, Alexander stirred, his eyes opening slightly. "Dad," he murmured, the medication making his voice small and confused. Derek tensed visibly, unprepared for being addressed as Dad for the first time. He moved closer, awkwardly reaching out to touch Alexander's arm. "I'm here," he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. Alexander drifted back to sleep, unaware of the profound effect his simple word had created. The hospital room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors. The following morning, Dawn received notice that all legal proceedings had been withdrawn. Derek's attorneys filed for dismissal of pending custody motions, cancellation of upcoming hearings, and termination of the court-ordered visitation schedule. With the documents came a handwritten note in Derek's precise script. "They deserve better than our war." Dawn read the words repeatedly, trying to decipher their meaning. Was this surrender or strategy? A genuine recognition of harm or merely a tactical retreat? The answer arrived that evening, a simple blue envelope addressed to Alexander and James, containing 2 lines. "When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. On your terms, not mine." Dawn recognized what those words must have cost a man who had spent his life dictating terms to others. It was perhaps the first truly paternal act Derek had managed, putting his children's well-being above his own desires. Chapter 9. The Long Road Back. For 6 months following Alexander's hospitalization, Derek Gray disappeared from the lives of his sons, not through abandonment this time, but through deliberate restraint. No legal maneuvers, no surprise appearances, no attempts to leverage his wealth or influence to force his way into their world. This restraint was perhaps the most difficult challenge he had ever undertaken, requiring him to battle against his deeply ingrained instinct to control and possess. Instead, he did something entirely foreign to his nature. He worked on himself. Twice weekly, Derek sat across from Dr. Eleanor Winters, a renowned psychotherapist who specialized in high-performing executives with personal relationship failures. Unlike the yes-men who populated his professional life, Dr. Winters challenged him mercilessly. "You've spent your adult life accumulating power," she observed during their 4th session, "but you've never learned the difference between being powerful and being a father." Derek bristled. "I'm here, aren't I? Trying to learn." Are you, or are you approaching fatherhood like another acquisition? Something to be obtained through the right strategy? The words struck uncomfortably close to truth. Derek had indeed been researching parenthood with the same methodical intensity he applied to corporate takeovers, reading books on child development, studying successful father-child relationships, analyzing where he had gone wrong. "There, my sons," he said finally. "No," Dr. Winters corrected gently. "They're their own people who share your DNA. The privilege of being their father is something you must earn, not claim." In addition to therapy, Derek joined an anger management group, an experience so far outside his comfort zone that he initially attended under a false name. Sitting in a circle with men from all walks of life, listening to stories of rage and regret, Derek gradually recognized patterns in himself he had previously justified as necessary intensity. On a crisp spring morning, exactly 6 months after withdrawing his legal claims, Derek composed a carefully worded email to Dawn. No lawyers, no demands, just a simple request. Permission to attend Alexander and James's basketball game that weekend. "I'll sit in the back," he wrote. "No interaction unless they initiate it. I just want to see them doing something they enjoy." Dawn's response came the same day, setting clear conditions. He would arrive after the game started, leave before it, and did maintain distance and make no attempts to speak with the boys unless they approached him first. Any deviation would end this tentative opportunity. Derek agreed to every stipulation without negotiation, a first in his adult life. The middle school gymnasium smelled of floor polish and adolescent energy. Derek arrived 15 minutes late, as instructed, slipping into the back row of bleachers. He spotted his sons immediately, Alexander playing point guard with confident precision, James less athletic but tactically aware on defense. They complemented each other instinctively, twins operating with unspoken coordination. Dawn sat midway up the bleachers, occasionally calling encouragement. She gave no indication she knew Derek was there, though he was certain she had noted his arrival. He watched his sons play, surprised by the unexpected swell of emotion in his chest. Pride, certainly. They were skilled and determined. But something else too, a painful awareness of all he had missed. Their first steps, first words, learning to ride bikes, losing teeth. A decade of moments, gone forever. When the final buzzer sounded, Derek slipped out as agreed, driving away with the image of his son's triumphant high five burned into his memory. 2 weeks later, Dawn permitted him to attend their science fair. The following month, a school orchestra concert where James played cello. Each time, Derek adhered strictly to the boundaries set, making no attempts to accelerate the process or assert control. After the 4th such event, Alexander approached him in the school parking lot. "You're really him, aren't you?" he asked. Without preamble, "The guy on the magazine covers, the billionaire." Derek nodded, unsure how to respond to his son's directness. Then why do you drive yourself? Don't rich people have drivers? The unexpected question startled a genuine laugh from Derek. I prefer to drive myself when possible. Gives me time to think. Alexander considered this, his expression thoughtful. Mom says thinking is important. She says you're smart, but you don't always think about the right things. Your mother, Derek replied carefully, is a very perceptive woman. This brief exchange marked a turning point. At subsequent events, both boys began acknowledging Derek's presence with nods or brief hellos. Dawn modified her restrictions, allowing short conversations after school functions, provided they occurred in her presence. These interactions were awkward, halting. Derek had never learned how to talk to children, and the boys remained wary. Yet gradually, fractured moments of connection emerged. James discovered Derek played chess at competition level in college. Alexander was impressed by Derek's knowledge of basketball statistics. Nearly a year into this careful dance, crisis struck. From an unexpected direction, Maria Vega, Dawn's primary investor and business mentor, died suddenly of a stroke. Her death not only devastated Dawn emotionally, but threatened Chromatic Learning's planned expansion. Maria's son, who inherited her financial interests, didn't share his mother's vision for educational innovation. He's giving us 90 days to secure alternate funding, Dawn explained to Catherine during a phone call. Derek wasn't meant to overhear as he waited to take the boys to their first approved outing, a museum exhibit on space exploration. Otherwise, we'll have to close the 3 newest centers. 2 days later, Dawn's attorney contacted her with surprising news. An anonymous investor had purchased Maria's stake in Chromatic Learning through a shell corporation, maintaining all existing expansion agreements and adding favorable terms for future growth. It took Dawn less than a day to confirm her suspicion. She confronted Derek after the boys' next basketball game. Did you buy Maria's shares in my company? Derek neither confirmed nor denied. Would it be problematic if a silent investor believed in the business model? It would be problematic if that investor expected to use financial leverage to control the mother of his children, Dawn countered. The investment came with no conditions, Derek said quietly. No voting rights exercised, no board seats requested. The documentation is quite clear. Dawn studied him, searching for the manipulative businessman she had known. Why would you do that? Because you built something valuable, he answered simply. Something that helps children, including our sons. It was the first honest conversation they had managed in a decade, not as adversaries or reluctant co-parents, but as 2 adults acknowledging each other's reality. The following week, Dawn permitted the first overnight visit, the twins staying at Derek's Manhattan penthouse with the agreement that Dawn was just a phone call away if they felt uncomfortable. Derek had spent weeks preparing, transforming his minimalist bachelor domain into a space that might appeal to 10-year-old boys. He converted a rarely used office into a bedroom with 2 beds, filled bookshelves with age-appropriate reading, and stocked the kitchen with foods Dawn confirmed they enjoyed. Despite his preparations, the evening began awkwardly. The boys seemed smaller in his vast apartment, their duffel bags pathetically inadequate against Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling views of Central Park. Your home is very big, James observed, always the diplomat. It doesn't feel much like home, Derek admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. More like a hotel I never check out of. Alexander wandered to the window. You can probably see our school from up here. Actually, yes. Derek pointed toward the Upper West Side. Right there. Have you been watching us? The question contained no accusation, just curiosity. Derek considered lying, then opted for truth. Sometimes, from a distance, after I learned about you, the evening improved over pizza that Derek against all precedent, ordered himself rather than delegating to an assistant. The boys gradually relaxed, especially when Derek revealed his extensive video game collection, a secret vice he'd never acknowledged publicly. Near midnight, with the twins finally asleep in their new room, Derek stood in the doorway watching their peaceful forms. Something tightened in his chest, an unfamiliar ache that Dr. Winters had helped him identify as regret mixed with tentative hope. When James fell victim to bullying at school the following semester, it was Derek whom the boy tentatively called. The conversation they had about standing up for oneself without becoming cruel, about the difference between strength and intimidation, marked the first time Derek had shared any wisdom that wasn't related to business or strategy. "Did I help at all?" he asked Dawn hesitantly when dropping the boys home afterward. "Yes," she acknowledged. "What you said about power carrying responsibility, he needed to hear that from a man he respects." Respects. The word lingered with Derek long after he'd driven away. Through continued therapy and consistent presence, Derek gradually earned increased access to his sons' lives. Dawn's boundaries relaxed as she witnessed his genuine efforts to connect with the boys on their terms rather than his. The true test came unexpectedly. Catherine Miller, Dawn's mentor and surrogate mother, passed away peacefully in her sleep 18 months after Derek had re-entered their lives. At the small funeral in Harbor Point, Derek stood several rows behind Dawn and the twins, maintaining respectful distance. He had come not to insert himself into their grief, but simply to be present if needed. After the service, as mourners dispersed, Derek noticed Dawn standing alone by Catherine's casket, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The twins were occupied with Catherine's niece, giving their mother a moment of private grief. Derek approached cautiously, stopping several feet away, close enough to offer support, distant enough to respect her space. He said nothing, made no attempt to touch her or offer platitudes. He simply stood, a silent presence acknowledging her pain. After several minutes, Dawn turned, wiping tears from her cheeks. Her eyes registered surprise at finding Derek there. "Catherine was the first person who believed in me after I left you," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "Both as an artist and a mother." Derek nodded. "She helped create the life that saved our sons from becoming like me." The honesty of this statement, the first time Derek had acknowledged that his absence might have been a blessing, hung between them. Dawn studied him with red-rimmed eyes. "You're different with them than you ever were with me." Dawn's observation carried no accusation, merely a statement of truth. "I'm trying to be different altogether," he replied quietly, the admission costing him more than any business deal ever had. Something shifted in Dawn's expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first acknowledgement that the man before her was not entirely the same one who had cast her out into the rain a lifetime ago. Chapter 10. Full Circle Redemption. 5 years after the funeral revelation, Harbor Point's waterfront had transformed. At its center stood the gleaming headquarters of Chromatic Learning International, Dawn's once modest educational concept, now a globally recognized approach to childhood education. 37 centers across 3 continents bore testament to her vision, with research universities studying the Campbell method of integrating arts with traditional academic subjects to enhance childhood development. Derek's transformation had been equally profound, though less visible to the public eye. 3 years earlier, he had shocked the business world by selling controlling interest in grey technologies to his executive team. With the billions from the sale, he established the Grey Foundation, focusing on ethical technology development and educational access for underprivileged communities. His new venture operated from a converted boathouse walking distance from Dawn's headquarters. a deliberate choice that allowed him to be present for his sons while maintaining professional independence. The twins, now 15, divided their time between both parents, their initial wariness toward their father having evolved into a relationship built on hard-earned respect and cautious affection. The morning before Chromatic Learning's International Conference, an event bringing educators from 12 countries to Harbor Point, Dawn arrived at headquarters to find police cars and fire trucks surrounding the building. Deliberate sabotage, the fire chief explained, showing her where water pipes had been strategically cut and electrical systems tampered with. Someone who knew the building well. The sprinkler system flooded 3 floors, and the electrical damage makes the building unsafe. Dawn's mind raced through implications. 500 educators arriving tomorrow. Keynote speakers from around the world. Press coverage that had taken months to arrange. We need to cancel, her assistant said, already drafting announcements. There's no way to salvage this. Dawn was about to agree when her phone rang. Derek. I heard, he said without preamble. Don't cancel anything. I'm already at the convention center negotiating emergency rental. Derek, that's not... The twins told me everything that needs to be moved from headquarters. I've got moving crews standing by for whatever can be salvaged. Your presentation materials, the interactive exhibits, everything. Dawn hesitated. This isn't your problem. Yes, it is, he replied simply. It matters to you and the boys, so it matters to me. Now, what do you need? 16 hours later, Dawn stood in the hastily transformed convention center, watching Derek direct the installation of the last exhibit. He'd worked through the night alongside her team, his suit discarded for jeans and a t-shirt, his normally perfect appearance disheveled from manual labor. At 3 a.m., when it became clear the original stage design couldn't be replicated, Derek had personally redesigned the layout, drawing on architectural skills Dawn had never known he possessed. "You're good at this," she'd commented, surprised to find him sketching detailed plans while crews waited for direction. "I designed our first product interfaces," he'd admitted, "before I decided executives shouldn't do creative work." Now, as dawn broke over the harbor, a coincidence of timing not lost on either of them, only the two of them remained, surveying what they'd accomplished. "It's ready," Derek said, rubbing his lower back. "Different from what you planned, but it'll work." Dawn nodded, too exhausted for words. They moved to the small office that had been designated as her temporary headquarters, collapsing into chairs. Across from each other. "Thank you," she said finally. "I couldn't have salvaged this without you." "Yes, you could have," Derek countered. "You've never needed me, Dawn. That's what I never understood before." Something in his tone, a raw honesty she'd never heard from him during their marriage, made her look up sharply. "I owe you an apology," he continued, meeting her gaze directly. "Not just for last night or the past 5 years, but for everything. Derek, you don't have to. I do." His voice was quiet, but firm. "I've rehearsed this so many times in therapy, but now that the moment's here, I realize there's no adequate way to apologize for what I did to you." Dawn sat very still, the conference preparations forgotten as Derek continued. "I treated you as an accessory to my success rather than a partner in life. I dismissed your intelligence, minimized your talents, and humiliated you publicly. When you needed me most, the night you tried to tell me about our sons, I threw you away like you were nothing." His voice caught, a vulnerability she had never witnessed in him before. "For 10 years, I told myself a story where I was the wronged party, denied knowledge of my children. But the truth is, I created every circumstance that led to that outcome. I made it impossible for you to tell me. I made it unsafe for you to stay." Dawn felt unexpected tears forming. "Why are you saying this now?" "Because you deserve to hear it. Because our sons deserve to see that real men acknowledge their failures." Derek leaned forward, his expression stripped of all pretense. And because last night, watching you handle crisis with such grace and determination, I realized I never stopped loving the woman I was too blind to see when we were married. The confession hung in the air between them, as unexpected as it was unplanned. I'm not asking for anything, Derek added hurriedly. I've forfeited any right to expect your forgiveness, let alone your affection. I just needed you to know that I understand what I threw away. Dawn studied the man across from her, so different from the cold, controlled businessman she had married. 15 years of separate journeys had changed them both, tempering her naive optimism and softening his ruthless ambition until they had somehow arrived at a middle ground neither could have reached without the pain between them. We should get some rest before the conference, she said finally, not yet ready to address his confession. Months passed. The conference proved a tremendous success, further cementing Chromatic Learning's global reputation. The investigation revealed Dawn's business rival had orchestrated the sabotage, resulting in criminal charges and a civil settlement that funded Chromatic's expansion into developing countries. Through it all, Derek maintained a respectful distance, while remaining consistently present, attending the twins' activities, handling his parental responsibilities, and occasionally offering business advice when Dawn requested it. On the twins' 16th birthday, they insisted on a joint celebration, with both parents present. During dinner at Dawn's harborside home, Alexander raised his glass. To our parents, he said, with the directness that had always characterized him. Who figured out how to put us before themselves? James, always more perceptive about emotional undercurrents, had arranged the music playlist. As dinner concluded, he deliberately selected a classical piece, the same one that had played during Derek and Dawn's first dance at their wedding so many years ago. Mom never told us, but I found her old wedding album, he explained with innocent cunning. This was your song. Maybe you should remember how to dance to it. Derek looked at Dawn, silently asking permission. After a moment's hesitation, she extended her hand. They moved awkwardly at first, two strangers finding rhythm together. But as the music continued, muscle memory took over. Derek's hand at the small of her back felt simultaneously familiar and new. They're trying to play matchmaker, Dawn murmured, noting the twins' poorly concealed observation. Can you blame them? Derek replied softly. They want their family whole. We're not the same people we were, Derek. Thank God for that, he said with unexpected humor. Those people were a disaster together. Dawn found herself laughing, a genuine laugh shared with the father of her children, a man who had once broken her heart and now held her with a gentleness he'd never shown before. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Dawn and Derek sat on her porch swing overlooking the moonlit harbor. I meant what I said that night at the convention center, Derek said quietly. But I understand if... Dawn placed her fingers against his lips, silencing him. We've both spent too long living in the shadows of our past mistakes. I'm not that desperate girl seeking validation anymore, and you're not that cold man incapable of love. No, he agreed, we're not those people. So perhaps, she said carefully, we should stop letting them determine our future. 1 year later, on a secluded beach as sunset painted the horizon in impossible colors, Dawn and Derek exchanged vows for the second time. The ceremony bore no resemblance to their first wedding. No society photographers, no business associates, no lavish displays of wealth. Just their sons as best men, a handful of genuine friends as witnesses, and promises spoken with the hard-earned wisdom of those who understood exactly how fragile and precious love could be. The first time, I married you because it made strategic sense, Derek said, holding both her hands in his. This time, I marry you because nothing else makes sense without you. Dawn's vows were equally simple. I once loved the man I thought you could become. Today, I love the man you fought to become." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, their twin sons exchanged triumphant glances. Alexander, ever practical, whispered to his brother, "Mission accomplished." James, the more romantic of the pair, shook his head. "No, this isn't an ending, it's a beginning." And so it was. A family forged not through conventional paths, but through fire and forgiveness, finding their way back to love, with eyes wide open to both its fragility and its strength.